Okay, today what we're going to do is we're going to look at Pythagorean Theorem, and what I want you to do first off is, if you haven't watched the video on Canvas from Math Antics over Pythagorean Theorem, you need to do that first. Alright, so it's one of the best videos I've found over it. It's really all-encompassing for the most part. Does a very good job on explaining that, how to do it. You need to watch that, and then come in here and take a look at what I'm doing here. Most of what you learn there is the same thing I'm going to teach you here. This, I'm just showing you what the Get More Math questions look like and how to work those problems. So if you haven't watched that other video, please go do that. It's a really good one. But we're going to get into how to actually work these problems, the problems that you're going to see for today's assignment, and how to go through them. So Pythagorean Theorem, first thing you need to know is that you have the legs, you have the hypotenuse. Now I'm going off the assumption that you already watched that other video, so if you haven't done that, you need to do that. Okay, so we got our legs here, we have our hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is always directly opposite of the right angle. And this only works, Pythagorean Theorem only works, if you have a right triangle. Okay, so here is our formula. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now what you get to do is you get to plug in the two legs here and then find out what c is, the hypotenuse. That's the first thing we're going to do today. This is our first question, so we're going to go from there. So find the legs of the missing side, and can you see that? The actual problem? Now let me zoom in a little bit. That probably helps. All right, so let you see the problem just a little bit better. So it wants to find the legs of the missing side. So what they're saying is, hey, we can use Pythagorean Theorem to find our missing side of our right triangle. Because if I take a squared plus b squared, it's going to equal whatever c squared is. So we're going to take these two sides, 19 and 8. Now we have to determine, are both of those the legs, or is one of them the hypotenuse? Well, the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. So these two things are our legs. So we're going to take these two, and we're going to substitute them into the a and the b. Now we've all done substitution, so that's no big deal. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we're going to pick and say, well, we want this to be a and this to be b. Fine. 8 squared plus 19 squared equals c squared. Now guys, I am totally going to use a calculator on this stuff because it makes it easier. Okay, so we're going to be using calculators here. So, well, first, we know what 8 squared is, 64, but 19 squared, well, I don't know what that is. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do that, 19 squared, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so it's exactly like what we've been doing. So 361. So 361 equals c squared. So far so good. But now I need to add those two together. So 361 plus 64, we got 425. All right, so I'm going to move up here just so we got a little bit better view of it. 425 equals c squared. But I want to know, what is c's value? I want to know what the c value is. And I got this little square up here. Well, the opposite of squaring something is taking the square root of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to take the square root here and the square root here. Because when I do that, this undoes that. That's what we're doing here. But if I do that to this side, I have to do it to that side also. That's what's going on here. That's how this works. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root, 425 equals c, and now I'm going to go over to my calculator and I'm going to take the square root of 425. Now, I'm going to do that, but real quick, I'm going to look. Get More Math says to round to the nearest tenth. So we want this in decimal form. So we're going to come back over here to our calculator, and we're going to take the square root, second, square root, 425, and when I hit enter, notice what it gives me. It gives me this 5 square roots of 17. That's not what I want. I want the decimal form of this. So I'm going to go into mode, and I'm going to change. I'm going to change it to classic mode. We have to be able to go from math print to classic and back again without any problems. So we need to be able to do that. So I'm going to come down here to classic. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to clear out, and then I'm going to do it again. Second square root of 425. And I closed it in, and I hit enter. 20.615, and it says to round to the nearest tenth. So we're going to come back over here, we're going to round to the nearest tenth. 20.6, this is my 10th spot, so I'm going to look here at my 100th spot. Well, if that is 5 or more, I raise this up and I drop all these other numbers off. If it's 4 or less, I leave this alone and I drop off all these numbers. So 20.61, 4 or less, I'm going to leave that alone, drop off those numbers, so I've got 20.6. So right here, 20.6. All right, well, 20.6 inches. You have to put the units on there. So look, label required. You got to put those units on there. So 20.6 inches. And there we got a good answer. Guys, that really is all there is to that right there. All right? There's not a lot to this once we understand the concept of what's going on here. Okay? So we're going to look at it again. Find the missing length of the side. Well, look. Again, what did they give us? They gave us one leg, two legs, opposite the hypotenuse, right? Or the right angle is opposite the hypotenuse, or the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, however you want to say it. Same thing. So this is our hypotenuse, this is a leg, this is a leg, and we're going to take and we're going to substitute it in just like what we just did. We're going to do another one, just like that. Okay. And guys, draw the triangle and set up these numbers so you don't put them in the wrong spot. Make it easier on yourself. Right? I mean, once you know these are legs and you know what they've given you, then it's going to be a little bit more second nature to you. But until it becomes that, draw it. So B equals 24, A equals 9, and then substitute it in. 9 squared plus 24 squared equals C squared. 81 plus, I'll do it up here again. 24 and x squared, enter, 576 equals c squared. Add those two together, 576 plus 81 gets me 657. Okay, so 657 equals c squared. Take the square root of both sides to undo this. Square root here, and that gives you c here, and then whatever the square root of 657 is. So again, I'm already in classic, so I can stay there. Second square root 657, close it in, hit enter. 25.63, 25.6, because I'm betting it's saying round to the nearest tenth, but let's check just to make sure. Nearest tenth, 25.6. So C, the distance, .6, the distance from here to here is 25.6 when B equals 24 and A equals 9. That's what this is saying. That's what we're talking about. So 25.6 inches, because we're talking about inches here. Okay, so 25.6 inches. Now hopefully, yeah, there we go. All right. So now look. So that one they gave us the triangle. Here they give us some words. A right triangle, so they tell you it's a right triangle. When they tell you it's a right triangle, we can use Pythagorean Theorem to find the missing side. A right triangle has a length of 11 and 9 inches. Find the length of the hypotenuse. So again, they're using this to find the hypotenuse. So you substitute those in. It's the same thing. Same thing. Okay? Guys, this is exactly what I would do. I'd have a triangle drawn that's a right triangle, and I'd go through here and say, well, this side's this side's this. Let's substitute it in. All right, so 9 and 11. 9 squared plus 11 squared equals c squared. 9 squared is 81 plus 121. I believe that's correct. I'll check it here in just a minute, just to make sure. I think I have that correct. Yeah, check it. But we gotta add them together anyways. So you get a 202 total. 202 equals c squared. And then you take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of both sides. Okay, so now you get c equals whatever the square root of 202 is. Second square root 202, close it in, hit enter. And you get 14.2 if you round to the nearest tenth. 14.2 round, yep, 14.2. And we're still talking about inches there, so we're good there. All right, so that's when all they give you is the legs. Now what happens whenever they start to give you the hypotenuse? Let's change this over so that we can see that, and then we will go from there. Give a leg and hypotenuse. Give me just a second. Okay, so here, same setup, except now they didn't give me one of the legs. Notice the hypotenuse is directly opposite the right angle. So, or the 90-degree angle. So right here is the hypotenuse. This is one leg. We're missing a leg. So we need to know how much that distance is from here to here for this leg. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to substitute it in. Except now, instead of putting both of them here, we're missing a side. Well, we have the hypotenuse, so c equals 24. And now this is really important. This is always going to be your biggest distance. That's always going to be the largest distance there. So opposite, that's 24. So I know c equals 24. This one is 14, and you can put this 14 in either the A or the B. It does not matter. It does not matter. I'm going to put it here just because I feel like it. Makes no difference. Okay, so A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I'm going to substitute in A squared plus 14 squared equals 24 squared. It's all the same thing. But now I'm going to be solving for A. Remember how we solved all our equations? So we're doing the same thing here. Okay? We're going to be doing the same thing. So I'm going to do 14 squared first. And I don't know what that is, so I'm going to do that. Probably should know what that is, but I don't. 14 squared. 196. Yeah, I should know that. A squared plus 196 equals 24 squared, and some of these we'll do them so much you'll start to memorize them. 576. All right. So from here, what you're going to do is you're going to add the inverse of 196 to both sides, because that'll cancel this out right here. So plus negative 196. The other thing that you could have done is you could have just subtracted 196 from both sides. Those two things, they're the same thing. Okay? So minus 196, that crosses that out, leaves you with A to the second equals, and then 576 minus 196, 380. All right, so what you have is A to the second equals 380. I'll put that down here just so that you can see it. Okay? So I have A to the second equals 380. Now I'm going to take the square root of both. Right? The square root here gets me A, right? Because that undoes that. That's a really key concept that you have to understand. Taking the square root of something undoes the squaring of something. So that's a big key concept that you have to do. Then I'm going to take and I'm going to plug this in the calculator, square root of 380. Okay? Square root 380, close it in, hit enter, 19.5, and I'm betting it's saying to the nearest tenth. Yep, nearest tenth. So 19.5 is this. A equals 19.5, and then whatever the units was. I don't remember what the units were. Yards. Yards. Okay, that's what this is. So the distance from here to here is 19.5 yards. This was 14 yards, this was 24 yards, so we found what the distance for the other leg was. That's all there is to this, all right? When you're missing one of the sides, and I'm going to do another one because I want you to see for sure how to do that, 19.5 yards. Oh, perfect. Again, same setup. A right triangle has a leg of length 11 and a hypotenuse of leg 42 yards. So yards gave me one leg, gave me the hypotenuse. Find the length of the other leg. They even told us, hey, it's the other leg we're looking for. Okay, so what's the missing point or missing side? Again, draw your triangle. Make it easy on yourself. All right, so I'm going to resolve this. Right? What did they give me? Well, one leg, B, equals 11. The hypotenuse, 42. We're missing the other leg. And again, it doesn't matter. I can put this here. And it's the same thing. Matter of fact, let's do that so that you can see both sides of this, right? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. All right? 121 plus B squared equals 42 squared. 42 squared. 1,764. 1,764. All right? Draw your line because we're solving for B. We want to get our variable all by itself. That's what we're doing here. Okay? That's a positive 122. So we're going to add a negative 120. Sorry, it's a positive 121. We're going to add a negative 121 to both sides to eliminate that. That crosses that out. That brings this down. B to the second equals negative. 1,643, and then I'm going to take the square root of both. Okay? You'll get B equals, and then whatever the square root of that is going to go right there. So let's find what the square root of that is. Square root of 1,643. Square root 1,643. Enter. That's 40.5. Yep, round to the nearest tenth. So watch where they're rounding to because sometimes they do tenth, sometimes they do hundredth. This problem set looks like it's all doing tenths, but be careful with it. 40.5. 40.5, and I believe it's yards. Yep, yards. So 40.5 yards. All right, guys. If you got any questions, one, rewatch the two videos. Go back, rewatch Math Antics, rewatch this one, go through it slowly, make sure that you're doing it correctly. There's some small spots in here in order to make some mistakes in here, so be careful with it. If you have any questions, you run into some problems, come back, talk to me, I'll help you out.